So somewhere in front of me is a child's seat. I told you there was a chair in there. How cute is this little kid's seat? I designed it in SketchUp maybe 6 years ago, but never built it at the time. I wasn't planning on ever making it, but I needed a project to practice hand-cut mortise and tenon joints on, and also I thought I'd join in on Carl Pope's chair build challenge. If you've been noticing lately, all my videos have a bit of a theme to them. I'm all about improving my accuracy, my skill, and my safety in the workshop these days. I want to become a high-quality woodworker, so I need to practice. That's precisely what this project was all about. I'm not all that great at hand joinery, so I decided to use this as some real-world learning instead of cutting daily joints like I did with my dovetails. This seat is filled with mortise and tenon joints. There's over 20 of them in here. I milled the wood down using machines, but did all the joinery by hand. For a chair, it is surprisingly easy and straightforward to build. It just takes a little bit of time. I use messmate hardwood for the bulk of it, and then I've got a little bit of a Merbo offcut here, but you can make a pair of these from pine on the table saw, and you could paint them over the weekend. Fun little project, and it's a great learning exercise. Now I never know where to begin a project like this, so I decided to just grab one of the front legs here and just get into it. The front legs get an L-shaped mortise on the top, so I use the marking gauge to draw that out on the top and sides. Then I fumble around with the Ryoba saw here for a little while, just trying to get it to cut straight to those lines. My thinking is that the Ryoba has a side which is suitable for rip cutting, but I really struggled to make it work here. On the plus side, all the dovetail chiselling practice I've done lately has really come in handy, as I chopped out the edge of the mortise using the hold down on my bench. And yes, this is how I found out that my hold down has compressed its hole so much that it won't actually hold down. That was fun. I'll fix that another time. Instead, I just used a couple of bench dogs with the scrap in between to position my workpiece against. Chopping the actual mortise out was fairly straightforward. I just took it really slow and I got there in the end. Did take a fair bit of time though. For the second front leg, I decided to try a different method. This time I used my Dazuki saw, which is much easier to cut straight. And then I used a brad point bit in the drill press to hog out the bulk of the material and finished up with my chisels. This one went a lot faster than the first one did. Pretty much the whole point of this chair is to help me practice cutting tenons by hand, something that I really rarely do. Honestly, I still struggle to cut straight lines even with all the daily dovetail practice. This front bar gets a tenon on each end and they took far too long to be made. It absolutely isn't perfect, but it was tightish enough for me to let it go. With these front legs, the design calls for two pieces slotting into the one mortise. I wanted to make them interlock as well, so the tenons would both have a decent amount of length on them, and also to help with strength when they're all glued in together. Just like I mentioned in my dovetail video, I just can't visualize things like this well in my mind. It just doesn't work like that for me. So I had to draw lots of lines and leave marks all over the place just to help me out. Fortunately, after a lot of test fitting and tweaking and finessing, I did get a satisfactory joint. A little bit loose, but I can live with it for now. When it came to the mortises on the back legs, I pretty much performed the same steps that you've already seen. First I drew my lines, then I marked them out, then I drilled and I chopped until I had what I needed. One thing that I learned from this project is that I really need clear guides when I work. So here you can see I used a combination square and knife to mark these mortises, and then a marking gauge to set the walls. Then I get a pencil and I colour it all in to make it really clear where I'm supposed to be chopping. Now this is something that's probably common sense to everyone else, but once again, another tip that I picked up from dovetailing. Now I make sure that my mortises are sized to my chisels. It's a simple change, but it's really helped me out. Normally I just make my mortise an arbitrary size and have to chop extra to fit it, so it's good to be able to say that I'm starting to learn now. If the mortise is the same size as your chisel, it goes a lot faster. Once done, it's just more cut, cut, chop, chop, bang, bang, until all the parts fit in together. Alright, status check. We have a little chair, sort of, all just loosely dry assembled. What I'm up to are these three, I guess they're called slats that go in the back of the chair here. My worry with these ones is that they're quite thin. They're only, I'm going to say 12 mil. So I've got to take off just a couple of mil on each side, which is going to be a little bit tricky if you're not, you know, a great hand tool woodworker, but we'll see what happens. And they sit along here, 1, 2, 3. So I haven't done a spectacular job on the back of the chair so far, so this is going to be a little bit tricky. I would start over, but I would have to prep all brand new wood, and I just can't bother doing that. So I'm going to persist, and we'll see what happens. Take away 38, and take away 38. So I've got 61, and I want to have one. Now, unfortunately, laying out the back slats here really hurt my head. I don't know why this is the case, but even when I make the effort to calculate things properly and lay out pencil lines and marking lines, I still manage to stuff them up. Kind of annoying, to be honest. But that's what practice is for, I guess. Next time around, I'll know better. So a little bit of an oops here, nothing too bad. When I set the marking gauge, I set it for pretty much the thickness of this piece of wood going into here, which means I haven't allowed to actually put a tenon on the end of this. So I actually need to bring this marking gauge line in a little bit more, and ditto with the width. Easily done, I think. This is the chisel that I'm going to use, so that's how wide I need my mortise to be, so I can actually get in there with the chisel. And so that it's not the full length, I'm just going to come in just an arbitrary amount, which is the width of this chisel. So you can see it a bit better. This is the line that I marked with my marking gauge, which is far too wide, because it's going to be the full thickness of that piece, which is not what I want. I want it to be only as wide as this chisel, because this is what I'm going to use to mark it out. So I'm going to come back with my marking gauge and put a line on both sides there. So I've almost finished the joinery on the chair. It's come out okay. I'm beginning to realise that the way I went about daily dovetail, and I did one dovetail every day and, you know, practiced and learnt and thought about it during the day, and sort of the next day round everything came out better. That was the smarter way of doing things, because cutting, I don't know, 20 mortise and tenons in a day or so for this, I'm not really learning the lessons that I should be learning. So it hasn't come out as good as I want to, but it's still not too bad at all. I quite like the design. I think it's nice and cute, this little chair. I've got one more to cut. This is the very first one I did, which I did on the table saw, and I promptly stuffed it. So this is now a wasted piece. So I've got another scrap, which is a little bit smaller than the rest, but it's all I have prepared. So that's what I'm going to use, and I'll put that down the bottom here as the brace. And then it's just time to clean everything up, glue it all up, and finish. However, there's one more problem. It's a bit hard to see on camera, I guess, but the frame at the back here is about 3 mil taller than the one at the front. So I've got to go through and shorten these by just a little bit. Once I've got these the right size, I'll do the last piece that goes through the middle, and then we're in the home stretch. So here you can see why my frames aren't the same size. I ended up cutting the tenons on these pieces separately to fit their mortises, when what I should have done is mark their lengths at the same time first. Not the end of the world, just some extra cleanup required, but another lesson learned. Once I fixed that issue, I did a dry assemble of the chair. It all came together and honestly it looks super cute. I really love it. The seat for this chair is just a couple of scraps. I actually ran out of messmate, so I used a scrap piece of Mervo as well. It probably helps make it look even nicer with that accent piece, to be honest. Now, I don't have a fix-it fingers in my workshop. You know, one of those guys that loves sanding so much that he spends 5 weeks making a video about it. But I sharpened up my planes and smoothed all the pieces out using them. This worked great. It's so much easier removing burn marks and smoothing with a plane compared to a sander. If you haven't tried it before, you really owe it to yourself. Get on it. I didn't even have to wear a mask. The only sanding I did for this chair was very, very lightly with 240 grit by hand, just running it all over the sharp edges and the corners to make sure it felt nice to the touch. And that was done in 5 minutes. The glue up was fairly uneventful, mainly because I took it so slow. I did this over a course of a couple of days, just doing it a few parts at a time and making sure that they were nice and square before moving on. And to my complete and utter surprise, the chair was perfectly, and I mean perfectly, square once it was dry. Absolutely perfect. I'm amazed by that. I guess it helps that it's such a small project and it's easy to maneuver, but honestly, it was still a surprise. I gave it 3 coats of a wipe-on poly, which is a 50-50 mix of a canned poly and turps. And I know I just said that the chair is perfectly square, so if you're wondering why it's rocking, my bench is not flat. The chair is perfect, I promise you that. Now, one thing I should mention, yes, I did glue the seat directly onto the frame. On a small chair like this, I think it's going to be fine and I'll get away with it. On an adult seat, obviously you can't do that because of wood movement. However, this chair is literally the first of a few practice pieces that I'm going to make. So over the next year, I'm going to make more of these with the aim of getting faster and more accurate each time. So I'm going to use this chair to compare my work and make sure I'm getting better and better. If I was making this as a gift or if I was going to sell it, then I probably wouldn't glue the seat down, but I'd use buttons or screws in slots or something like that instead. For my purposes and for the use that this chair is going to see, gluing it in is perfectly okay. Honestly, it's probably going to sit in the garage and I'll use it as a step stool. So we're done. Big shout out to Carl Pope for the chair build idea. This was a lot of fun and I've ended up with something that I'm both really proud of and also something that I know that I can improve on as well. So that's my kids' chair. Hopefully you like it. Don't forget the plans are available on my website. Make sure you hit the subscribe button and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.